So when somebody finds problems and vulnerabilities in security products, should that be advertised? Should they be made public? Let's see the pros and cons of this. So the bad thing is that the bad guys, they do not do research on vulnerabilities as often as they used to be. Why? Well, because they have the second Tuesday of every month, and in Patch Tuesday they have the published vulnerabilities, and all they need to do, and there are plenty of tools that makes that job not so hard, is reverse engineer the actual or investigate pinpointing the particular vulnerability reflected, and they develop an exploit, and then there is a race to patch. I mean, they count on the fact that so many organizations do not patch quickly enough, so if they are able to exploit the vulnerability before the organization patches them, then they are in. I mean, this discussion is all restricted to what is called responsible disclosure, right? Which is you give the manufacturer of the actual software product enough time for them to fix the vulnerability before you make it public. Let me use this acronym here, FAF, FAME after fix. So you don't, otherwise it doesn't even worth talking. It's irresponsible to do it any other way. However, if they don't fix it on the established reasonable time, then you need to push them into doing so by making it public. And to give a framework to this conversation, I'm going to make an analogy, right, to make this interesting. There is a YouTube channel that I watch, I'm subscribed to it, called Lockpicking Lawyer. And it's a guy that basically shows how easy it is to open the padlocks that we consider secure. And it's actually amazing. I mean, why does he do that? Well, not only he has a very successful YouTube channel that is monetized, and but he also sells the tools that he uses in his videos, right? So that is really a very interesting thing. But why does he do it? Well, it's because people get a false sense of security when they use a lock, and what this guy is showing that, well, you should not count on it. So in my words, this is an influencer that by revealing those vulnerabilities in the products, they force manufacturers to improve their products. Unfortunately, manufacturers cannot patch existing locks. They can make it better, right? He also, or influencers like him, informs customers. So they cannot rely their valuables by just putting a lock or thinking that a lock is going to deter the actual bad guys. You may say, well, but isn't he teaching the bad guys about how to do that? Well, I think the bad guys already knows that, right? It's really, he's informing mostly the public on how to do that. In the same way that the bad guys in security, they know about these type of things. This analogy has some problems you may be picking up already. In the case of the physical security with padlocks and locks, the bad guys need to expose themselves physically so they can be seen and caught and put in jail, etc. And in many cases, well, you realize that there's been a physical theft of something because the goods disappear. That doesn't have to be the case for example, in the Equifax breach. Gazillions of data about all of us went out, and the data was still there. It was just copied, right? So I will argue that the good guys, the security researchers that finds all these vulnerabilities, I'm going to call it good and bright minds, they do the same. They are the same kind of influencer, right? They don't do it in such an entertaining way as these guys does it, but they do the same. They seek fame, and they deserve such. And in some cases, we'll talk later about it, they can even come up with some some money. Now, when I'm talking about this research, let me make a caveat here with things like pen testing. It's a different thing. If you test vulnerabilities on an existing site, that's a crime. It will be like saying, like, I'm going to learn how to pick a lock by going into my neighbor's and testing with his lock. You'll be put in jail. So that is not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about here is about taking a piece of software and explore what are the possible vulnerabilities you may do. You may decompile the code and figure out how it works, and that's what these guys are so good at it. Well, in the same way that there's no, and I learned this with this this guy, the lawyer that picks the locks, there's no lock that is pick proof, and he shows that, or at least he shows the one he picks on. Maybe there are some that he cannot pick, he doesn't show those. But he also gives you a good sense of, okay, this one took me a lot longer, it's a lot harder than other ones. So you get a flavor of, if you're going to buy one, what will you choose? Well, but in the same way, there's no software that is vulnerability free. I mean, code that is written will have vulnerabilities. There's no way around it. It's how responsible you are in fixing it is what makes the difference here. And many people will agree with me that the software license agreements gives the software industry a big pass. They can get away with so very many vulnerabilities that imagine that this will happen to somebody who manufactures a car or any kind of product. They will be covered by lawsuits left and right and be facing a lot of problems. Perhaps the government should do something about this. I don't know. That's debatable. Well, what are the alternatives if we wouldn't be doing this, right? Well, let's talk about a few things that might be interesting. There's a tournament that was or is held in Canada. I think it's in Vancouver, called Pwn to Own, in which good guys go there and find vulnerabilities, and they walk up with good money in a week if they prove that they had found vulnerabilities. And the good guys finance these events in order to have these bright minds to find the vulnerabilities so they can fix them and then make them public. That's responsible. So they get a good deal as well. Well, the Chinese were actually having a great time doing this, and their government, they don't enjoy the freedom we enjoy here. They prevented them from, I think it was in 2018, they no longer could go to Pwn to Own, and they called I think it's Tianfu Cup. This is held in China, probably in order to make sure that those guys, those bright minds, do not leave the country, and they can make sure that those vulnerabilities are given to the government. Who knows what's happening there? But they own that tournament there. So that really a reflection on how important it is for government. So many things rely on the internet and the software we use that this is a state affair. And so it is in here in the U.S. I mean, we have our NSA, and by the way, I'm on the belief that we want those guys to be the very best, and we want to have our brightest mind go and work for them and make sure that they can protect our infrastructure. And that's the business that they're in. But again, that can be controversial. What are the alternatives if we don't do that? There are organizations like Zerodium, it's probably the most famous, in which these people pay big bucks to anyone who finds zero-day vulnerabilities that have not been disclosed. Well, do you want our bright minds to get money from those guys, or do we get them from those tournaments? And that's what the law should keep protecting our bright minds in order to do that research, to find those vulnerabilities and allow patches to be developed. But the final thought is that you need to patch fast, because the minute that the patch is announced, that's a race between you and the bad guy. You need to test those patches thoroughly. Why? Because, well, sometimes those patches are released too quickly and they break all the things. If you've been watching this video lately, then you know what I'm talking about with the printer server in Windows or Exchange. Here one fix after another one, or RDP protocol, or things of that nature that they never seem to get it fully right. And you also, when you do that, and this is topic for another subject, you need to have a revert patch. I mean, sometimes when you patch something, well, if you're testing on a VM, you revert to the previous image, and then I'm not going to apply that patch, or you can be selective on it. There's also the shadow copies that the operating system provide in order to allow you to backtrack on a patch when it breaks things. But again, I do believe that vulnerabilities should be keep on being public, and that imposes a big responsibility on those guys. I feel sorry for all of you guys who have to, be doing patching. I guess that after Patch Tuesday comes miserable Wednesday for you guys because you need to fix those things. But that's the reality that we live in.